This is every death that we see in Poppy Playtime. Before we get into the events of Chapter 1, we first have to go over the Hour of Joy, an event orchestrated by the Prototype where all of the toys agreed to attack every person in the factory at the exact same time in order to catch them by surprise and kill everybody inside, which ended up working, and many employees and visitors were slaughtered that very hour. But now, getting into the events of Chapter 1, we have one main death which happened at the end of the game. Throughout Chapter 1, we were being stalked by Huggy, who seemed to have been observing us to gauge our strength, and in the final chase scene, we managed to find a very heavy box above the catwalk we were standing on, which allowed us to pull it down, destroying the catwalk and making Huggy fall all the way down to the bottom of the factory. And although we thought this was his death at the time, it turns out that he actually survived in Chapter 4. So although this isn't technically a death, I had to conclude it in this video. But then in Chapter 2, we actually have a few deaths that you might not have realized happened. Once we managed to survive musical memory, we hear Mommy kill Bunzo Bunny, and his body was later found inside of the main room in the game station. Then, after we completed Whack-A-Wuggy, we hear pretty much the exact same thing, where Mommy killed the Huggies. However, in statues, it turns out that PJ Pugapillar actually survived. Maybe because Mommy was distracted with the fact that we managed to escape. Or it could be that PJ's Usain Bolt running speed allowed him to survive and escape Mommy's grasp. And finally, in the end of Chapter 2, Mommy Longlegs crashes out and tries to kill us, where we eventually make it to a long hallway with a scanner. And as we're trying to get into this room, Mommy Longlegs was running down the hallway to kill us. And y'all, listen, I was begging for her to trip and fall, but she can't, apparently. Maybe she can, I don't know. Wait, no, she can't. She's dead. But once we enter the room, we find a working grinder that crushes Mommy to death, and shortly after, the Prototype drags her body away. Then in Chapter 3, once we make it into the school, we're warned by Miss Delight to not go any further.
Wait, I recognize you. Yes, I remember. You used to work here. How are you? Alive. Barb says you're looking for your co-workers. Catnap wouldn't like that you're here. You should leave. For your own safety.
However, because we're stupid, we decide to continue, and eventually she tries to kill us, but she only moves when we're not looking at her. So, all while solving more and more complex puzzles, we have to make sure that we keep an eye on Miss Delight before she sneaks up behind us. And eventually, when we make it down to the final hallway, she just stops caring and tries her very best to run at us. It was not a good one, which is when we then shut a gate right down on her bottom jaw, bro. Her legs hit the recoil from it. And can we get a slow-mo replay of this, please? But as we go deeper into the school, we find Dog Day being tortured by Catnap, where he then tells us more about what's happening in the factory and tells us to leave and that there's nothing left to save. But before we could even do anything, a bunch of mini smiling critters come into the prison cell and crawl inside of Dog Day's body, most likely eating him alive, as he told us earlier that all they want to do is crawl beneath your skin and eat away at you bit by little bit.
A million pairs of eyes are on you now. Watching, waiting, hungry. They want nothing more than to crawl beneath your skin and eat away at you bit by little bit. Fill what feels empty inside themselves.
But because of this, Dog Day most likely died from being cannibalized by the other toys, and we can even see white rings that appeared in his eyes. And speaking of white rings in the eyes, Catnap has the exact same thing, which makes me think, was he also a bunch of smiling critters controlling his body? Well, whatever it was, in the final boss fight, we managed to overcharge our green grab pack hand and shock Catnap, causing him to fall to the ground, where he then then tries to dispense his red smoke on us. But because Poppy later told us that the red smoke can ignite, the red smoke caught on fire, burning Catnap from the inside out. But in just a few seconds, he managed to be back to normal. But before he could attack us, the prototype comes into the room and Catnap offers his life to him, where the prototype stabbed right through the back of his head, killing him. Which makes me think, what was the point of this whole fight if the prototype wanted him dead anyway? Well, that's a theory for another day. But also in chapter 3, when we make it to the counselor's office, we peer through a hole in the wall and see Catnap literally snatch up a Bunzo bunny toy in half a second, probably eating him for some sort of meal. And lastly, in chapter 4, we were introduced to many new characters such as Yarnaby, Pianosaurus, and Harley Sawyer, all of which ended up dying. The first being Pianosaurus, as when we try to scooch across a ledge, we end up falling and Pianosaurus looks at us like we are his next meal. But little did Pianosaurus know he was somebody else's 9th meal, because But before he could eat us, Doey grabs him and smacks him so hard across both of the walls it either knocked him out or killed him on impact. And then he ate this dude in 3 whole bites. 9th meal. How did you do it? Spill the beans. Actually, you don't seem like the type to spill anything. And if anything's spilling, it's landed directly in this man's dough gullet. But then later in the game, we come across a set of giant sliding doors, which, when opened, allowed Yarnaby to reach us. But after successfully maneuvering through all of the different puzzles, we were led into a final chase scene with Yarnaby. But here's the thing, his death actually changed. In the original version, Yarnaby was caught onto a chain, then lit on fire and fell down a giant hole. But because he caught on fire for no reason, it seems that Mob changed his death to be easier to understand, where we see a slow-mo shot of him grabbing onto the hook and then falling down into a lava pit, absolutely confirming his death. Because with Huggy falling down in chapter 1, it'd be pretty safe to assume that some people would also assume that Yarnaby would survive in the same way that Huggy did. And also in chapter 4, Harley Sawyer gave us a moral dilemma about killing a Simon Smoke in order to save our own lives. But if you manage to go up into this vent, you can actually save both yourself and the Simon Smoke. But because most of us didn't notice this on the first try, then the Simon Smoke would have died in order to allow us to keep going. But then we finally make it to where Harley Sawyer was kept. We walk into the room and we're quickly thrown down by one of his Sarly Hoyers, where we have to solve a puzzle that opens the door to come back up. And once we make it back up, we pull out his Omni chip and kill him. But here's a question, why did he need his Omni chip to live? He didn't always have it, so this seems to be some sort of plot hole or something. I don't even know. But then when he dies, his brain literally does a backflip, like a perfect landing too, and he somehow managed to talk after his brain was disconnected. That is almost the equivalent of a computer running without it being plugged in, so I'm confused as to how this all makes sense. But for the final death of the series so far, after Safe Haven explodes, we see the 3 Doey children fighting each other, with Jack crying saying that we killed his friends, Kevin blaming us for everything, but Matthew trying to defend us. But with 2 of the 3 Doey children accusing us, they tried to kill us. And this leads us to a boss fight room where we managed to freeze Doey, pull down a saw on him 3 different times, and turn him into a bunch of goop. But this is what y'all don't understand. It is never that easy in Poppy Playtime. So when we try to open the door, Doey then grabs us from behind, somehow the same form as he was before we splunked him into goop, and he starts to blame us for everything that happened. And with some quick thinking, we managed to freeze him and pull down a giant drill with the intention to turn this dough man into dough. I'm sorry, I got nothing. But before dying, he managed to literally hold this drill in place, meaning that there is absolutely zero debate on who is the strongest character in Poppy Playtime. Like, bro, he could have hit squats if he wasn't already weakened with that on his back. But during his short monologue about everything that's happened so far, he eventually gives out and the drill crushes him to death, where 2 of the Doey children tell us that they're sorry, but yet it seems that Kevin was still angry at us. And that that, my beautiful friends, is every single death that we see in Poppy Playtime. But what do you guys think? Let me know down in the comments. Thanks for watching, subscribe, and click on this video right here.